Good morning and welcome to the Rabin Report. I'm your host Elliot Rabin, so get ready to get triggered. Good morning and welcome to the Rabin Report. I'm your host Elliot Rabin, as you might have heard in our intro. Kind of a rough start, but it's okay. And with me, I have my expert panel as usual, Marshall, Adam, and Daniel. How are you guys?
Good.
I'm doing great. I'm doing fantastic.
Awesome. So, now before we get to our main story, I just want to celebrate the fact that this episode marks our 10th week on air.
Yay!
Happy anniversary, guys.
Happy anniversary.
So, I want to...
Lots of good memories and triggers.
Yeah.
Trigger moments.
Exactly.
We've done great for each other.
Done great things.
Here's to many more episodes.
Exactly. So, I want to say thank you to everyone who's supported us along the way and tuned in whether on spiritlive.ca or Facebook Live. Thank you to you guys for always having great discussions on the show and triggering people. And thank you to my parents who believed in me and this show. So now we can go to our main story.
Actually, did you not want to discuss one particular thing, like in a more local issue? With,
I was going to save it for the end, but
okay, cool.
I was going to save it for the end, but
My
if
bad.
you guys want to start with that.
I mean, it's a little brief, so we can just get it out of the park.
Okay, so
Actually, I think we should save it for the end.
yeah,
we'll save it
that's
for the end.
what I was
We'll
thinking.
save it for the
We'll save it for the
That's
end.
good.
So today, once again, we've changed our scheduled topic at the last minute. We had planned to discuss abortion since it was postponed last week. However, we felt that the recent death of Fidel Castro could spawn a very heated discussion, perhaps even triggering. Now, I personally did not know much about Fidel before the announcement of his death. Now I know the very minimal information necessary to facilitate the discussion, but luckily you guys do, which is why we have this show. So let's begin with the first question. It's a fact-based question. Who was Fidel Castro in one sentence?
Marshall, you have to go ahead.
Yeah, in one sentence, Fidel Castro was the tyrannical communist dictator of Cuba for 57 years.
Adam?
Okay, for the record, for the rest of this show, most of you know I'm the left-wing commentator on the air. For the rest of the show, for the purpose of my point, I would like to recognize now that Fidel Castro did have his faults. He did have issues. He was very repressive towards journalists. His prison population was predominantly black. It was predominantly... there were a lot of members of the gay population in prison. He had his own... He was very tyrannical. He did have his own aspects of fear-mongering. But for the purpose of my points throughout the rest of the show, I'm not going to mention the bad side of Fidel Castro. Marshall and Elliot and even Daniel can take care of that, but I would like to talk about the good in Fidel Castro. So, for me...
just to have some
just
good
to-
discussion.
Just to get a discussion going.
Yeah, everyone's got to play devil's advocate, but even necessarily
Yeah.
this.
For me, Fidel Castro was a cigar aficionado, people uniting, anti-capitalist leader. He was the comandante. He was the leader of Cuba.
Just the one sentence, because I wanted to make an actual, like a full discussion. So just, Daniel, one sentence. Who was Fidel?
Fidel Castro is, or ever will be, the most important political figure of the Cuban state. And with a promising beginning from the uprising with the revolution from the government. And there's even more problems that have trickled down from the past 50 years and stuff like that, fighting for the people and stuff like that. Unfortunately, his fight could say would be not as effective, and it was just not what he set to do in the beginning is not what happened in the end. That's it. That's all I want to say about that.
Makes sense. So now we'll get into a more specific part about Fidel Castro, which is going to get really heated. What were his greatest accomplishments and his greatest issues and problems that arose?
I'm gonna start off. I think to I suppose defend Fidel in a way. I think taking out Batiste, removing Batiste from the government of Cuba, that can be certainly considered a good thing. I think there was a lot of issues in Cuba that Fidel helped to remedy, I suppose. He did, as Adam said, unite the people, and he did achieve some good things. He certainly brought Cuba ahead in many ways from where it was, at least. As far as accomplishments go, that's all. That's where I'm gonna stop from there.
All right, Adam, Daniel, you guys want to chime in?
You go ahead, Adam.
For me, Fidel Castro, again, as I said, anti-capitalist. He managed to fend off American intervention in terms of in their economy and in their land for the 9 years you said he was?
I think it's 57.
57 years he was in
A
power.
really long time.
A very, very long time. He managed to dodge the Clinton administration's effort with wet foot, dry foot. He raised the literacy rate in Cuba from something in the 60% to the 95th or 6th percentile by closing schools for 2 years and having older children teach younger children how to read. He was able to support his people by not, like he was able to sort of have a self-sustaining island. Imports to Cuba were low, other than like he would try to grow anything he could on the island before importing. He nationalized companies. He did oust Batiste, as Marshall mentioned. And I think his biggest accomplishment was giving the middle finger to the U.S. Cuba, proximity-wise, is very close to America.
80 kilometers, I think, from Miami.
80 kilometers from
80,
Miami.
90 kilometers, yeah.
Something
like that.
Something like that. And he basically did not allow the U.S. to intervene. This small little sugar-producing island, and sugar is their main export, this small little sugar-producing island managed to scare the hell out of Americans and out of the U.S. government that, it'll spread communism. The wave of communism will hit America. One fault that I would like to mention, and this kind of counteracts my previous statement, one fault I would like to mention was that he did not create a communist island. And for most of us, we think of Cuba as the communist place, but Karl Marx himself understood that communism, the best producer of money and capital is capitalism. And Karl Marx himself understood that you need to transition from capitalism into socialism into communism to have a true communist nation, because if you share zero, it's still zero amongst people. Cuba is a very poor place. They have not had production of cars since the 50s. Food is rationed amongst people. Milk is rationed amongst people. And it wasn't truly communist, and it wasn't as red as people thought it might be. It is, I think, the closest we can get to communism, in a sense. But other than that, I don't think he succeeded, by my standards, in terms of communism.
I would just like to put a correction on the record of myself. It wasn't Batiste who was in power before Castro, it was Batista. Batiste is a dry shampoo.
Batista also one
So
of
that was my mistake.
Was
it-
I just thought
The question
I
is,
saw
would the
it.
dry shampoo shampoo have done a better job?
I think it definitely would have increased the economy by 57% exactly, and
I saw.
I'll have
I
to
saw
fact
Bat-
check
I
that,
saw
but
Batista
true.
here, but I thought you were up higher in knowledge, so Batiste was a shorter form, so I kind of went with it.
I was wrong. Apologize.
in terms of, like, we had this conversation before in the same way of Donald Trump versus Hillary Clinton, and how like I really don't like Donald Trump and stuff like that. Now I'm like whatever about Donald Trump, but in terms of everything that from the knowledge that was poured into me, like even as a little kid, about Fidel Castro, like me being Latino and everything, like I have like other people who, like, the most important thing like about like Fidel Castro's greatest accomplishments is the fact that he overthrew another government. He's a revolutionary, and that's very, very important to you can't underplay those facts and stuff like that. But and I've seen like there are positive things about Cuba and stuff like that. How like their healthcare system is incredibly like advanced for a developing country like that, and the only problem is like we see is like communism we've seen that communism as this form of communism in the Cuban island was not successful. I personally don't believe that. I personally believe that this type of government was not successful in the certain fact is like we can like analyze it here from our perspective here in Canada and stuff like that. But if you look at the perspective of Cubans and people who used to live in Cuba and stuff like that, they have a completely different view of Castro. I know I've seen a couple pictures on like Metro and stuff like that, saying like, "Oh, long live Fidel Castro, let him die, rest in peace," and stuff like that. People who have been able to leave the country and like able to go to the U.S. or here in Canada, they hate Castro, and they have more than enough reasons to hate him and stuff like that. So
the anti-Cuban lobby in Miami is just ridiculous.
But like in terms of like Fidel Castro, like he's had a couple great accomplishments, but like in terms of like outweighing like the pros and the cons definitely are like 50 times heavier than what good he did for the nation and stuff like that.
Sorry, just to chime in very quickly. I got some stats on the literacy thing I mentioned earlier. It was between 60 and 76%, and in 2 years they managed to raise it to 96%. So that's
good.
What I wanted to
So, to what you said, Daniel, you said that he was a revolutionary. Someone of very political importance by the name of Justin Trudeau also said that. And so that was part of his statement regarding the death of Castro.
Now everybody on all my social media is going to label me as like this terrible person who
But what do you make of that? Because social media was not having it.
So
social media was not having the fact
First,
that
let's start off like this. Like, what does it mean to be a great revolutionary? What does it mean to be a great leader? A great leader is somebody who is able to stir up the people and is able to enact social reform and change. Is that not true? Can everybody agree upon that?
For sure.
If I'm not, like, I do have a little bit of bias in it. I don't like Castro and stuff like that. And I have a couple Cuban friends that do not agree with what he's done in the nation. But if it's just use a non-partisan lens or without any personal views. Castro had an objective that was to overthrow the government. And because he saw the government was exploiting all these poor people, he thought he could do a better job. Maybe he did, maybe he didn't. We're not going to argue that right now. But he did his objective. He was able to enact a complete revolution in Cuba. That means he's a great revolutionary.
You could say the same thing about Augusto Pinochet.
Exactly. You could.
But imagine Justin. You know,
you could say the same thing about Adolf Hitler.
Fidel Castro.
Stalin.
We're talking about a great leader. Hitler is somebody who's able to bring Germany from the ashes of World War One. It was a completely destroyed nation. It was like super. It was a super inflation. What was it? What was it called?
It was like 20. It was super inflation. Like 20 million Reichsmarks or something like that. Reichmarks to the dollar.
Yeah, it was crazy. So you'd have to have like what was it, like 1 million marks to buy a
bread.
loaf of bread.
It was so bad that you could actually burn your money and sell the ash for more money than what the actual money.
It was cheaper than buying paper itself. So people
and
were
Hitler
using
was
it for paper.
And so the point being, Hitler was able to take what the shitty country that was Germany at the time after that empire. Yeah. And he brought it to being superpower for the 40s and 50s. That makes him a great revolutionary. That makes him a great leader.
Now,
and the same thing is said for Castro.
Absolutely. So, ironically, Fidel Castro...
Do I agree with him? No, but that's not what I'm talking. That's not the point.
He died on Augusto Pinochet's birthday, which I think is funny because I think Augusto Pinochet and Fidel Castro are exactly mirror images of each other. One is the neoliberal, ultra-capitalist, almost libertarian, actually that's completely inaccurate, neoliberal capitalist dictator. And the other is the communist, the left-wing communist dictator. And, they were both, there was an overlap in their regimes. And I think that it's kind of like is anyone a comic book fan? Because I'm trying to remember.
Depends on what you say.
When Superman goes to that other world and he meets like other Superman.
You mean like Earth 52 and stuff like that?
Like evil Superman, you know?
Oh, okay. Like Bizarro?
Bizarro World, yeah.
Oh, Bizarro World.
Augusto.
We do this
I think Augusto Pinochet is the Bizarro World version of Fidel Castro.
Wait, you don't know that onto comics?
No, I'm not really into
Adam, no?
But yeah, so it's Bizarro World. So, anyway, that's not my point. But imagine if Justin Trudeau had said, you know, on that day, "Happy birthday, Augusto Pinochet. You were a great leader. What you did for the people of Chile was remarkable, and I'm so glad to have had you as a friend."
You know, it's funny because Twitter mocked him that way. I don't know if you saw
Yeah,
it.
no,
There
I
was a
did.
hashtag
Trudeau
called
eulogies? Yeah.
It was so funny. It was like, you know,
What was it? Give me an example. Like,
it was like Joseph Stalin, a great revolutionary, very efficient genocide of the Ukrainian people, who will be remembered as a revolutionary and a good reduction of carbon emissions or something because of the killing of the
And reduction of obesity.
But see-
reduction of obesity.
but see, like using that Twitter hashtag, we know it's satire.
Yeah.
But I feel like no matter what anybody says, you got to take it with a grain of salt. So
Yeah.
what Trudeau said, like it's
Look,
it's not the worst thing in the world
I
he
know.
said.
The thing, okay, I have 2 points to my statement here. One, the thing with leaders, there are leaders all over the world that have, you know, have done very much good for their people, but a lot of bad. You want to look at Saddam Hussein. Saddam Hussein gassed 5,000 Kurds, point blank, end of story. He did it. But he did have one of the greatest social healthcare plans in the Middle East. You want to look at Gaddafi. Gaddafi, you know, tyrannical leader. Tyrannical leader. A terrible human being, completely almost negligent to the female anatomy. He had this book called The Green Book, and he explained the menstrual cycle by saying that once a month women get sick for a week.
Oh my god.
And in that regard, we should leave them alone and leave them to their blood and whatever.
Okay.
He did, however, have a push for home ownership. He gave a credit to every first-time home buyer. He gave a credit to every first child birth. He did have. Libya was not the tribal sort of.
People paint it as if it
rebel
was always
control.
was a war-torn country
Yeah,
when it wasn't
not
like that.
always a war-torn country. It was a wall it was a barrier to Europe from Central African migrants. It was a good place to be. You want to look at Afghanistan. Afghanistan was if you look at pictures of Afghanistan before the Russian invasion, Afghanistan was also a good place to be.
Maybe like on the
Yeah.
verge of becoming fully developed
Yeah.
countries.
Abdel Nasser, the first president of Egypt. I don't think he's the first, but he's the first sort of real leader in Egypt. He nationalized the Suez Canal and created a lot of uproar. Hugo Chavez kept Venezuelan oil in Venezuela and removed it.
Reduced the price.
Exported, but
Yeah,
they're
the
also-
prices there were ridiculously low in
Yeah,
comparison to everywhere else.
there also was a lot of problems in Venezuela with hunger and food shortages and poverty and whatnot. And another thing, like, so to conclude the first part of that, like that was my first part, to conclude that it was, you have to, you pick and choose with leaders that you support. You know, you want to look at even Barack Obama. Barack Obama, everybody loves Barack Obama, but he's leading 7 drone campaigns right now all over the world, and he's killing innocent people.
Yeah, people paint Obama as if like he's like,
Yeah.
oh,
Look
The
at him.
best
He did a
politician
he did
ever,
a video
something
with
like that.
BuzzFeed. Look at him. Dumping a cookie too big for the cup. Thanks Obama. Funny stuff. But he killed 300 people in 300 innocent people in Pakistan with a drone. You need to, like, everybody has idols. Everybody has people they look up to. Everybody has, when you want to build a vision of yourself as a leader, if you want to go into that, everybody looks at someone that they look
Right.
up to. I'm not necessarily saying I look up to Fidel Castro, but he did do a lot of good for the Cuban people. Quickly, to finish off my second point, Justin Trudeau, I think personally, has done a very good job at detaching himself from his father. I think that from the beginning, he wanted to sort of distance himself, other than that brief letter that he wrote to a guy next to him on a plane that said, "Just watch me," when he asked him how he's going to defeat Harper in the next election.
yeah.
I think that he's always tried to stay distant. There have been people have been hounding him with like, oh, look at this video of your dad. What do you think of it? He's like, oh, it's nice. Like, I remember Peter Mansbridge did an interview with him about this picture that he's holding Justin Trudeau like a suitcase as a child, and there's a soldier saluting to him as he's walking with his dad, or not walking, being carried by his dad. And they asked him, what did he think of that? He's like, oh, it's very sweet. That's all he said. I think that he's done well, but I think for this brief moment, Pierre Trudeau and Fidel Castro were great friends.
And that's why he expressed those particular opinions.
Yeah, and I think that he had an obligation as the son of Pierre Trudeau and as the new kind of chair of the Trudeau administration, like the second Trudeau administration. I think that he had every right to do what he did. He was a great revolutionary. He was a great leader, and that's contested, and it's okay for him to be on one side. You know, there was a small backlash, but there was also a large uproar. I mean, there was a small uproar, but also a large amount of support. People supported him. He died. He's dead. You know, regardless of what you think, he was the idol of a lot of Cuban people. You can say the same for Kim Jong-il when he died. And a lot of North Koreans cried for him. You know, what is he doing? He's leading a nuclear program. So I think he was right to do that.
It's all propaganda, though.
There's a certain
Yeah, I know. But to the people,
exactly.
It's not propaganda. It's what they know.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah.
And that's exactly.
So there's a certain level of nationalism towards
Exactly.
towards all of these countries and stuff like that.
Mhm.
I like the idea of like patriotism and everything, but it's whatever. I think like Marshall made a nice joke saying how like with there was going to be an amendment to the Ryerson's we'll just use Constitution for that we were going to have to do sing the Canadian anthem every time at 9 a.m.
Actually, I wasn't joking.
No, you can see he's lying to me now.
No, so I was joking that it passed. So there was at the general meeting, there was a
which will be discussed later on in the show.
Yeah, but there's a possible motion to have the national anthem played every day at school.
Oh, I'd like that.
I was joking with Daniel that it passed and that we had to sing it, that we were required to sing it.
See what? Because I wasn't paying attention, so I'm like, okay, why not? Sure, I guess. But back to what I was actually trying to say with my point is like, that level of patriotism. Even here, Canadians, like everyone here should be patriotic in their own way. I don't feel like you should be compelled to, but I think that like in example like the Cuban people and like North Korean people, I guess too, the level of like patriotism there is unprecedented, and that's why people who like are in the nation, they feel so strongly about Fidel Castro or they feel so strongly about King Jong-il, right?
I cannot believe I'm about to quote this person right now, but in the words of Jesse Ventura, patriotism is earned. And I think that Fidel Castro, amongst all his faults and backlashes, he earned the patriotism of the Cuban people.
Just so our viewers know, could you explain who Jesse Ventura is?
I can give her a go if you don't.
He's probably one of the most credible people like on the planet, I think.
He's the governor of Minnesota, but before that...
What?
Was he,
Well, former governor.
Oh, okay.
Former governor of Minnesota.
Oh my god.
Was he a wrestler?
Yeah.
He was a wrestler. And
Pro
he's
football player.
Yeah, pro football player. He's also a 9/11 truther, I believe. He believes that 9/11 was an inside job. He's a very conspiracy theorist guy. He was the former governor of Minnesota.
Has a couple of TV shows explaining about those conspiracy theories.
Yeah, probably. I think that the quote that I'm saying came from an interview an interview about Colin Kaepernick.
Mm-hmm.
And people were saying that Colin Kaepernick is anti-American, unpatriotic.
No, man.
And
or it's just like that new thing right there where it's saying they're going to charge people for 2 years in jail
for
burning an American
for
flag.
burning
Like that's, I mean, like, I don't care how pissed I am at the government. I don't think me burning a Canadian flag, like, I don't think I'd be compelled to do
Aren't
that.
there
Like,
laws in Canada, though? You can't
I
deface a
don't
flag?
think in Canada you can burn a Canadian
Yeah, you can't.
In Canada, you can burn a flag.
Well, I'm saying
You
burn
can't
money.
deface
You
a
can't
flag,
burn money.
though.
You can.
You can't. Because I remember this one time we got a flag for somebody because they were leaving.
And you all
they were leaving
signed
the
it?
country. Yeah, and we all signed it. And you know, people I was working for, they were really concerned. They're like, "How's she going to get through airport security?" So I'm pretty sure.
display a defaced flag, but you can deface a flag.
Okay, that makes sense.
but see, like, an example, like, even the idea of defacing a flag is its own
just
political
seems
statement.
Yeah.
But, I mean, if you want to do it, I guess, go ahead.
No, you can even take that back to Vietnam, the Vietnam War, where
Back in now.
back in Nam.
Good
People were
morning,
burning-
Vietnam.
where people were burning their draft cards,
Mm-hmm.
and they were burning the American flag, and they were defacing the American flag. You can even take it back to that.
Yeah, you know, I think flag burning. I think it's silly.
It is
it's
a little silly.
reprehensible,
It's harsh.
but
It's very, very
It's
harsh.
just-
I do think that.
I feel it's a
one
very
should have the right-
extreme like way of
doesn't-
trying to.
it
like,
doesn't
people-
accomplish anything.
People fought.
Yeah.
People fought so you can wave that flag.
Yeah.
I don't want to be that person. The troops died for us. I don't want to be that guy.
But it's true.
But it's true.
You know,
You know,
they did, and it's just
Yeah,
But,
people don't.
you have the right to do it, but why would you? Is the question.
Like I don't agree. I don't agree with like wars or like maybe like I sure as hell don't agree with like any type of American intervention in another country and stuff like that.
Yeah.
It never ends well.
Like, but in terms of like war is never gonna end well and stuff like that. It's
Or
always
never
problematic.
ends.
It's gonna cause way too much diplomatic problems and
Yeah.
stuff like that. But sometimes war is necessary and it's justified, right?
Mhm.
And I know like we're here all nice in our comfortable little chairs in this room in the studio and stuff like that. But if there was any like Canadian peacekeepers like in Aleppo or in like any part of the Middle East or stuff like that, right?
we
We will never
concerned.
understand the issues and the struggles that they're gonna face, and you have to respect that and stuff.
There's
Yeah.
going to be a huge.
I have a couple of friends that are like in like
Yeah.
military, Navy, all that
Yeah,
stuff.
me
I've
too.
won.
Yeah, and like
Yeah. There's
good
gonna-
on you, man.
yeah.
You did it.
There's
That's what I'm
going to
saying.
be a huge deployment of peacekeepers to
Latvia?
Mali, I believe.
Oh,
Okay.
And I support these troops. I feel for these troops, regardless of whether or not they're there to fight and they're there to keep peace. Peace is the most important thing.
hmm
And I will historically myself, I've been very anti-war. I've been very disrespectful towards veterans, and I'm very cringeworthy.
Yeah,
See, that's the
I have
problem.
my own history with that.
I'm very cringy at myself for that. And
Yeah.
I remember it was corrected because one time I was in a Tim Hortons,
hmm
and a guy in full uniform walked in. He had the badges. He had the what is it in Canada? Not the Purple Heart.
I'm not sure what the
The
Canadian.
equivalent?
I don't know what the equivalent is, but he had
The
his,
Victoria Cross, maybe.
Thank you.
Is that it?
Well, the Victoria Cross.
Something
I
like
don't know.
that.
I don't want to. I don't want
A very well respected
Yeah, I
honor
don't wanna
given
talk
from
out
the
of my
Canadian
ass,
military.
But he had his tours stitched in on his uniform in Kandahar in Afghanistan,
Mhm.
and I froze. And I was sitting in a Tim Hortons. It was full, and there was one table. Like I was sitting on the table alone, and I got up and I'm like, "You can take the table." And he looked at me and he's like, "Thank you." And I said, "Thank you for your service." And I walked out like shaking. And this is me, veterans,
You just saw a
they're
soldier.
contributing to the discourse. And then I saw this guy and I'm like, and I just kind of
hmm
froze.
I get that.
And from that moment on, I had such a new sort of born again respect for Canada and the flag. And while I may not support war, these people are more brave than I'll ever be.
Yeah,
So,
that's a great attitude to have. I feel that very much as well. Like, as a you guys know, I was a big anarcho-communist as a
Yeah.
kid. I was a big like
war, what is it good?
yeah. I was a big like F the troops kind of guy.
I like that
but,
song. That's a
like,
good song.
You know, no, that's ridiculous because nobody likes war. Well, that's
Not
not true.
nobody.
Most people don't like war.
Yeah.
Nobody likes the idea of going into battle.
But either way, regardless, I think you have an obligation to support the troops, and I don't like to use the term obligation because I don't like to think anybody's an obligation to do anything. But I do think that it's just you should. I can't think of a stronger word to use than you should.
You
But
should feel compelled.
you should. Yeah, you should feel as though you have to support the troops.
Yeah.
You don't have to, but you should feel as though you have to.
I agree with that statement.
hmm
And I mean the same with your country. I think it's a great point that patriotism is earned. I think I'm not sure if I necessarily agree with that. I kind of want to say that patriotism, in most cases, is default. However, I think that
almost
there are
entitled in
certainly-
a sense. Or?
It's default to a point. Like it's
Yeah.
default until you become socially aware. Like at some point you can choose whether or
Mhm.
not to be patriotic. As a young kid, I don't think any first grader will be like, "No, I will not wear this flag,"
Yeah.
or "I will not stand for the national anthem. I'll take a knee at the national anthem."
Yeah, but for me, like as a little kid, I was like, okay, like whatever, like, but
Yeah.
like I didn't like care. I didn't care.
No, but I did care when I would hear.
I felt nice, but like I didn't
Yeah.
care. The only times it actually feel really nice and amazing, and it kind of like I forgot about it for a moment. But like whenever I go to like a sports thing,
Yeah, that's what I was
like,
just gonna say.
or like when I go see the Raptors, or when I go see
Yeah.
TFC, or something like
Like
that.
I was
right?
the happiest 13-year-old kid when we won the 2010.
Oh, I was
Olympics.
crazy.
I was crazy.
Yeah,
I
and
was glued
those
to
are
my
beautiful
television,
moments of
yeah.
patriotism
Yeah,
and stuff
absolutely.
like that.
And you know, I think that patriotism.
Winning Dylan
it's-
passed it to Crosby for that game-winning shot, like that's it, exactly.
Patriotism can be undeserved. I think in cases like Colin Kaepernick, you know, he has every right to
a
take a knee
terrible
for the
football
anthem. He has every right to take a knee for the national anthem. However, in the words of the dead Kennedys, I think he needs a holiday in Cambodia, or rather
That's a great song.
a holiday in Cuba, a holiday in
Venezuela.
Aleppo.
Venezuela.
Because, you know, again, every right to do that, it's just ridiculous, you know?
Yeah, that's what Jesse Ventura was saying.
Yeah.
Can't believe I'm saying it again. That's what Jesse Ventura was saying. He was like, I don't agree with what he's doing, but I agree with his right to do it.
Yeah.
He was talking about how in Minnesota there was a move in the Minnesotan Senate to pass a bill requiring everybody to stand for the Pledge of Allegiance, and if you didn't stand, you would be fined or reprimanded somehow. And he vetoed it immediately because he didn't believe that we should be forced to be patriotic.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, absolutely.
The problem with Cuba, relating it back to our
Right.
topic of discussion, the problem with Cuba is that with every communist government, with every government that's not so buddy-buddy with the U.S., there's no cooperation in terms of how we know how Cubans live. The only sentiment that I know that I can find about how Cubans live is from Cubans in exile, Cubans that have left.
But see, like using like that's what I'm saying. Like with my friends that I know that are Cuban stuff like that.
Yeah.
You kind of like I feel like you're forced to like take their opinions and I would base them as fact.
Yeah.
Like they would experience stuff like that.
If you were like,
it's like the truth about what great Cuba is.
exactly, if you were so in destitute to get on a boat and leave.
Mm-hmm.
And leave in treacherous waters. It's not a Lake Ontario to go from Cuba to Miami or
Yeah, you can't just have your floaties go.
yeah, you
like
can't
this.
you can't doggy paddle. It's not gonna work. If you were able to do that, then you must really hate Cuba. So I think that that says a lot for Cubans and Cuban society.
Absolutely, and I see all this malarkey from my
Malarkey.
comrades
Malarkey.
from my
Nice.
comrades
Joe
over
Biden?
at Socialist Fight Back and such. And people, I see so many people saying, "You only think Castro's bad because of the American propaganda." No. That is the exact opposite.
Terrible
of the case.
argument for your case right there.
That is the exact opposite of the case. We have made communism trendy. We have made it a cool thing to wear this.
Millennials have
Yeah.
made communism
Like,
trendy.
oh, do you want
Exactly.
everybody to have like? Oh, if we had a society and we all had $100 a week and every single person had $100, would you be cool with that?
It's
Yeah,
communism.
that's communism, bro.
It's a cool
I guess I'm a
thing
communist.
to wear the CCCP, to wave the hammer and sickle, to
That's an
be-
amazing symbol, the
to-
hammer and sickle,
Oh,
because like hard work, dedication, and
Yeah.
labor
to
to the fruit of like the nation.
be Blair Academy. I'm not sure if that's the right name of the school. To be a Upper Canada College, North Toronto graduate who lives in a $600,000 condo, going, "Oh, I identify so much with the poor of the city. If only I could live in St. Jamestown and live with those people, but I can't because I love my $600,000 condo. But trust me, I know what it's like to be poor. Trust me.
I feel for the Jane and Finch.
If only-
I feel for Jane and Finch.
If only I could live in Cuba under Castro instead of under
I don't think,
Kim Kardashian Trudeau here."
see, like, I like to talk. Oh my god, you're losing my train of thought. But that was really well spoken, man. I like
Thank
that.
you.
In terms of like the quality of you brought up some like amazing like stats in terms of like and like facts of like what Castro's done for the society, like in terms of like the literacy rate and everything like that. But what I'm back into like what a Cuban exile is as a form of garnering new information about the actual Cubans. Like that's the best place for information experience from Cuban exiles. And one of the I'm somewhat close to explains how think about it, I'm like, okay, why are you here? Like why Cuba's communism, right? So okay, maybe everyone's equal and stuff like that. It's like, yeah, everyone's equal, but equally poor, and that's the problem.
That's what I was saying.
It's
Yeah.
the same type of thing that happens with an aristocracy, like with the exploitation of the poor and all the paupers and everything.
Yeah.
And only like the control from the few. That's exactly what's happened in the Cuban state.
Yeah.
The Castro family and everybody in there has complete power, and the military is using it to coerce the poor into doing their bidding and stuff like that.
See, that's what I was saying. Like, Karl Marx understood himself that there's no better generation of money than capitalism.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're poor, if you share zero, you'll still have zero amongst every person. I'm sorry, I'm still laughing about what Marshall said.
Yeah.
Not laughing at what he said, but laughing about
I
his
feel it,
presentation.
Yeah, it's a very good presentation.
I think the idea of communism and the idea of I'm gonna say the cliche here. Communism, good idea on paper, bad idea in practice. Communism is I think what everybody should strive for. Everybody is equal, but there is no such thing as equality for me in what I believe. I think that
By that you mean like in a state with the people? Or
No,
what?
in terms of the idea of equality is giving everybody the same, right?
Yeah. There's a difference between equality and equity, right?
Yeah. But not everybody needs the same as the next guy. I don't need the same amount of anything. Or let's say, okay, I don't need the same amount of... I don't need the same amount of sunglasses as Elliot.
Oh, that's true. That's true.
Sorry, I saw the sunglasses on his...
Yeah.
on his
I love my
on his-
shades. Hold on. These are my friends call them my trigger shades. So. There we
Oh,
go.
geez.
I'll just do the rest of the show
What's
like
the
this.
rumbling sound like when the trigger thing, the boom, or whatever?
Yeah.
Triggering intensifies.
Oh.
Yeah. Triggering intensifies.
So
There you
I
go.
don't need the same amount of sunglasses as Elliot. He doesn't need the same amount of I don't know, physiotherapy as me. Yeah, I know it's a very kind of...
You don't need the same amount of hair gel
I
as
don't
I
need the same
do.
amount of hair gel as you do. You don't need the same amount of, I don't know, jeans as I do.
I mean, I wear jeans a lot, man. So your
okay.
argument's completely invalid now.
Okay. Well, you know what I'm getting at,
Of
right?
course, I do.
And, in anywhere you go, there are going to be the rich, there's going to be the poor, the middle class. For a different discussion, I don't believe there's no such thing as the middle class. Middle class is very subjective in terms of where you live and how much you make.
Mhm.
But
It's such a broad term.
it's
but
a
yeah.
very, very broad term, and I think it's actually made up by politicians when they want to pander
Yeah.
to the largest majority of people when they say, we support the middle class. Okay, who's the middle
I
class?
support everybody who's aged 21 to 65.
Yeah, that's the majority of the
That's who I
population.
vote. That's who my voters are.
Communism can work if... Well, you know what? I don't think it can work, but in theory it can.
In theory, yeah.
And the people that support communism, a lot of the communist millennials, they support communism just because they've read the manifesto. Manifesto is a good document. I read the manifesto in my history class. Maybe because I'm left-wing, I like the document. The Communist Manifesto, in short, and it's a very long document, and don't quote me on anything I say because it's a very short summary. The Communist Manifesto, in a sense, says abolish private property, remove wealth from the bourgeoisie, which is
The ruling class.
the ruling class, and give power and wealth to the proletariat. To the proletariat, which is the hardworking, low-wage people. And I think that, especially in America, I know that. I know there is a problem here in Canada with wealth inequality. I know that, but it's so much more defined and outlined in America. The cycle of poverty in America is so much harder to escape than in Canada. I hope. And I think that, in communism, if everybody's in poverty, then no one's in poverty. And the
That's a
thing is,
good point, actually.
Accurate.
and I know that it's very, you're looking at me and you're like, okay, but people are still poor. But it's equal poverty. And people in Cuba, they're not necessarily unhappy. My mom went to Cuba and she did a whole, she left the place that she was staying at. She did a whole tour of Cuba. And she said people were happy. They were living in huts, in overglorified huts, but they were happy. And I think that says a lot for communism because you don't necessarily need money to be happy.
Yeah, and
That's a
now,
good point, yeah.
I've always felt it works on paper, but
It's like
not
an
in
endless
practice.
cycle of capitalism as well.
I've never felt that's necessarily accurate. I'll finish up quickly, but I think that communism on paper in theory, it requires the limitation of freedom. It requires repression of freedoms and liberties, and it requires transgression on people's natural negative rights. And that's what I really just can't stand about it.
Yeah.
So, that was a phenomenal discussion. I did have a bunch more questions ready to ask, but just the last question I'm going to ask before we move on to the RSU issue. What does the future of Cuba look like now that Fidel has died? In just a few short sentences.
Well, I think that, before even Fidel was dead, there was this whole new opening of the door between the U.S. and Cuba. This happened towards the end of the Obama administration, that, Cuba might be sort of laxing the rules of travel. Quickly, we're living now in a world where all the revolutionaries are dying. Shimon Peres, the last founder of Israel, just died. Pinochet died a few years ago. The leader of Chavez died a few years ago. The leader of the PLO, the Palestinian Liberation Organization, died a few years ago.
Mm-hmm.
We're living in this decade where all the revolutionaries are dying. And all the younger generations, and even our parents' generations, can't identify with revolutions that have happened.
Yeah, it's too far gone.
It's too far gone. It's too far away.
Far gone, like Drake said. Sorry.
My mom, like my grandparents were 10 years old when Israel was founded.
Mm-hmm.
They cannot so much identify with the founding of Israel and how hard it was to get Israel to where it is to be. We're sort of ending this whole passion and drive that our predecessors have had to freedom.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because we have freedom. We've done it. We've got it.
Yeah.
And I think, come 10, 15 years from now, maybe Cuba will have a general election. Raul Castro, I can't verify this, but he announced that he'd be stepping down
Really?
in a few years.
Wow.
It's the end of the Castro dynasty.
How old is he? Isn't he like...
He's like 86.
He's like 86.
Yeah, well, Castro was 90, right? So
Yeah.
Crazy.
The Emperor of Japan, Emperor Akira, I think it's Emperor Akira.
Yep.
He is announcing that he's stepping down. We're ending this. I know that the Emperor in Japan is very much symbolic, like in
Completely, 100% symbolic.
but it's the symbolism of that. We're ending the imperialism. We're ending the revolution.
We're going into a new age
We're
of
going
politics
into a
and
new
state.
age
Yeah.
of slow growth, of just cruising, and I think that's what's in store for Cuba and the rest of the world.
Now, I would like to be a bit more pessimistic, unfortunately. I think that things are going to get worse for Cuba. I think that I really hope they don't, but I think that this is going to lead to some American businesses going over to Cuba, moving, just like getting rid of all the Cuban businesses and just bringing business out of the States as well, bringing business out of Canada. It's going to be worse for every party involved.
And Daniel?
I'm more scared. Like I agree with what Marshall said. How like Cuba's not going to be like. It's not like now. Like, oh, it's going to become a completely new progressive new nation. I don't think that's going to happen at all. But I'd like to see that. I'd like to see an election happen. That'd be cool. But in terms of what I'm seeing, like, and you're also talking how it's like the end of revolutionaries. I would not be surprised if in the next 15 to 20 years, maybe, I don't know. Actually, I don't know. It depends how long. I wouldn't be surprised if there's like another revolution who basically sees everything that happened with Castro and stuff like that and wants to bring down that regime. I guess we can use that term, and instill like maybe its own democracy. Like it's full on democracy that's like not with so much control with the military. Maybe.
So that was a great discussion, guys. And now I want to just briefly mention for the last 3 minutes what happened at the RSU annual general meeting. Marshall, you were there, and would you like to quickly mention?
What an awful bureaucratic mess that was. Basically, we spent 2 hours voting on the agenda, in what order things would be voted on. We talked about pro-life protesters being banned from campus, and the RSU taking an official pro-choice stance. I went up and spoke. I said, I don't think our school should take an official stance on the matter. It's exclusionary. I became public enemy number 1 after that. So,
oh my god!
So did one of my friends. We were both booed. Nasty business. Yep.
Boo, white people.
So then, after some of that happened, we moved on to a Holocaust Awareness Week motion.
Oh yeah.
I had actually left and stepped out for a bit because I was hungry, but I came back, and the place
hunger
was...
is food is important.
Or was it in pod? Was it in pod?
No, it was in the library.
In library.
The place was in chaos.
True.
and people were yelling at each other, and they were trying to amend it to make it more inclusive because the Holocaust isn't inclusive. And my thing about that is, you're right, the Holocaust isn't inclusive. Not everything has to be. I'm sorry, stop being a child and let somebody else do their thing. You don't have to be included in everything.
That's like justifying
Preach.
That's like justifying.
Preach.
That's like justifying. Like maybe if we had like a bigger Black History Month awareness thing and stuff like that, and be like, oh, we need to be more inclusive. We need to include Latino people and like Asian people. It's like, oh, just Racism Month instead.
The Holocaust was so terrible because it was not inclusive. If the Holocaust were inclusive of everybody, I think it would have been much less of a tragedy.
Yeah.
If everybody were getting killed, every single group were getting killed.
Yeah, regardless of what you were, right?
You know what? People forget that a lot of other people died in these
Yeah,
concentration
absolutely.
camps. 6
Of
million
course.
Jews, 5 million others, gypsies, Romas, disabled,
people.
gay people.
Black people.
And
Black
and
people.
the whole thing is just about the Holocaust in general. Obvious,
The show-off.
It'll obviously talk about how 6 million Jews were killed, but it'll also mention the 5 million people that you just mentioned. And so, the amendment was what? What was
basically the idea was that we'd have
proposition?
a week dedicated to kind of educating people about the Holocaust, what happened during the Holocaust, and what that means for the future, and why Zionism is not something to be afraid of. And during that week, this is not something I agreed with, but during that week there was to be no anti-Zionist material around school. I didn't necessarily agree with that. I liked it, but I didn't agree with it fundamentally. So then I saw some displays of anti-Semitism. MSA was there.
MSA?
Yeah,
SJP,
MSA is
there.
Muslim Student Association.
SJP's
Students for Justice in Palestine.
They a lot of mudslinging from them, unfortunately, and I'm not trying to call them out as groups. I am trying to call them out as. No. There's some certain individuals. And
but you can't
they
paint.
stage-
You can't paint everybody.
Exactly.
to be the same.
Exactly. That's
What
what I
they
mean.
do you want to mention?
Yeah,
The walkout
There was
they did,
a walkout
which is
performed by those
absolutely
two groups.
appalling to me.
Because for those events, for the RSU general meetings, you need to have at any given time 100 people in the room at all times, so that you can have what's called quorum, where you can actually reach a fair agreement.
Oh, is that why they
between
suspended
MSAs.
it early? Because quorum wasn't.
They ended it early because there was a walkout from the MSA and SJP, and there was. I apologize. I'll just finish up. I just saw a lot of anti-Semitism. There was one student said to another student that anti-Semitism is not a real form of discrimination. It was quite appalling.
Yeah. Just
Pretty messed up.
it's okay. The walkout itself, blatant anti-Semitism. That's what it is. Okay, it's blatant anti-Semitism. It was against the Jewish people. It was against this motion that didn't even relate to Israel. It was just about Holocaust, not even just Jewish people. So you know what?
There's two different
they
ways
made
to
it
attack
less
it.
inclusive.
You know,
That's what they did.
For the people that identify with the Palestinian cause and with Palestinian nationalism, for those people that say that they don't have a problem with Jews, they have a problem with Israel. What about this? I think
It's a very exactly.
I
Very
think
good
that
point.
this is an example that you might have a problem with the Jewish people. I'm not going to say that you do, but you might. Just very, very quickly, I'll say this in 30 seconds.
Yeah.
The Holocaust does not mean that things like the Armenian genocide, the Ukrainian genocide, and the Rwanda genocide didn't happen. It does not mean that these aren't any less of issues. It does not mean that these are any less of a cause. You need to have a week where you can talk about the worst thing that has arguably the worst thing that has happened in history.
Yes.
And I think it's
And
very important.
so
There has to be a clear distinction between being pro-Israel and then being pro-Holocaust or whatever, or anti-Holocaust.
we do have to go. We might talk about this issue next episode. We don't know what. We always change our ideas. But again, I want to thank everybody for watching and listening. And we'll see you again next week.
Thank you.
Thank you.